All right, so today we're diving into Titanic 666.
Ooh, spooky.
Yeah, we've got this detailed plot summary, so we're going to use that to really unpack how the movie takes this real-life tragedy and blends it with supernatural horror element.
Yeah, it's really a cautionary tale, isn't it?
Totally. And the film just jumps right into it. And it opens with this scene, throws you right back to the sinking, you know?
Yeah, right from the start, you get this feeling of dread.
Exactly. We meet Elizabeth, and she manages to escape the sinking ship.
Oh, wow.
But her lifeboat snaps, setting her plunging into the freezing water.
Oh, that's awful.
I know, right? It's terrifying. She grabs onto the overturned lifeboat, but then her boyfriend Charles spots her from an iceberg and dives in to save her. But before he can reach her, a corpse pulls Elizabeth under.
Whoa.
I know, it's intense.
It's such a clever way to start the film, though, right? It immediately connects you to the historical tragedy, but then it also throws in that supernatural twist.
Totally. It's like, okay, we're dealing with something more than just a historical retelling here.
Exactly. It keeps you guessing, what other horrors are lurking beneath the surface?
Well, speaking of lurking beneath the surface, the movie then jumps to the present day, and we meet the Titanic 3. It's a modern replica of the Titanic, and they're sailing the same route.
Oh, no. Why would they do that?
I know, right? It's like tempting fate. And they even have artifacts from the original wreck on display.
Oh, that can't be good. It's like they're asking for trouble.
Yeah, especially when you consider this strange girl who performs a ritual using items stolen from the ship's museum.
Oh, tell me more about that.
Okay, so she's actually trying to summon the spirit of her grandfather.
Her grandfather?
Yeah, who was the captain of the original Titanic. It's kind of like a twisted form of ancestral veneration, you know?
Interesting.
Like she's trying to right some wrong or connect with him in this really disturbing way.
And this sets off a chain reaction of spooky events.
Oh, yeah. First, there's this disembodied violin music playing throughout the ship. At first, it's beautiful, but then it becomes this deafening, oppressive sound.
Creepy.
Yeah. And it seems to have a particular effect on this vlogger, Jackson, who's documenting the voyage with his partner, Mia.
Oh.
What happens? Well, one minute he's dancing with Mia, and the next, poof, he's vanished. It's like the music itself, snatched him away. And then Mia ends up dying, too.
Those poor vloggers. They walk right into a horror movie.
Totally. And speaking of horror, things on the bridge aren't looking so good either. The ship's systems are going haywire, communications cut off, and the captain is struggling just to keep the ship afloat.
So it's like the vengeful spirits are taking over the ship.
Yeah, it's like they're systematically dismantling the Titanic 3 from the inside out. There's this one scene where the engineer encounters a ghostly apparition.
Ooh, spooky.
It causes him to, freak out and break a pipe, leading to his death.
Yikes.
And if that wasn't bad enough, guess where the ship is headed?
I don't know where.
Straight towards the same iceberg that sank the original Titanic.
No way.
It's like history is on repeat, only this time it's laced with supernatural terror.
Okay, so what do you think is going on here? Is it straight up revenge or something more complex?
It's a good question. I mean, on the surface, it seems like the spirits are just out for blood.
Right.
But I wonder if it's also a warning, like a reminder that you can't escape the consequences of your actions, especially when you disrespect the past and, tempt fate.
Yeah, the arrogance of recreating the Titanic and sailing the same route, it's like they were asking for it.
Exactly. And that's what makes this movie so interesting. It forces you to confront our fascination with disaster and ask if we're actually learning from history or just setting ourselves up to repeat it.
That's a good point. It's like, are we just drawn to these stories of disaster, or are we actually trying to learn something from them?
So what are your initial thoughts on all of this? What's sticking out to you?
Oh, I hear.
And it's like the whole sinking of Titanic 3, it's just this horrifying mirror image of the original,
Right.
You see passengers panicking, desperately trying to get onto those lifeboats.
Yeah.
But just like in 1912, those lifeboat ropes, they snap,
Oh, no.
sending people plummeting into the icy water. It's
Yeah.
chaos, just pure chaos.
It's really effective how the filmmakers use those visual parallels, It really drives home that sense of history repeating itself.
Yeah, totally.
You see the captain clinging to that overturned lifeboat, just like Elizabeth in that opening scene.
Right.
It makes you wonder if some tragedies are just, inevitable, no matter how hard we try to change course.
And speaking of changing course,
Yeah.
remember the manager.
Mm.
The one who kept insisting that those artifacts were to blame.
Uh-huh.
Well, as the ship is going down, he finally admits it.
Admits what?
That he was the one who stole items from the wreckage,
Oh, wow.
and brought them on board. Talk about a confession, right?
It's a classic case of greed and hubris, right? He was so focused on the money he could make from selling those artifacts that he completely, disregarded the respect owed to the dead.
He totally did.
He basically invited disaster upon himself and everyone else on board.
And the consequences, they're pretty immediate.
Yeah, you could say that.
He manages to survive the initial sinking. But as he's clinging to that lifeboat, bragging about how he made it out alive, the ghosts, they turn their attention to him.
Like they were waiting for him.
Exactly. It's like they're waiting for him to, reveal his guilt.
That final shot of the manager, now a ghost himself, it's chilling. It really drives home the point that some actions have, irreversible consequences.
Right.
You can't just exploit the past for personal gain and not expect to face a reckoning.
It makes you think twice about all those treasure hunters out there, doesn't it? There's a reason why some things are better left undisturbed.
Totally. Like the film is saying, don't mess with what you don't understand.
Yeah. And it's not just about, respecting the dead. It's about respecting history itself.
Right.
I mean, the Titanic disaster, it was a monumental tragedy.
It really was.
And Titanic 666, it uses that weight to explore our own kind of complicated relationship with the past.
Yeah.
Do we learn from it? Do we exploit it? Do we just try to bury it? It really makes you think.
Definitely. And it makes you think about how we as a society choose to remember and commemorate these events.
Yeah.
Are we honoring the victims or just sensationalizing the tragedy?
That's a great point. And I think the film tackles that, particularly through this strange girl.
Oh, yeah. She's such a fascinating character.
Right.
On one hand, you can sympathize with her grief and her desire to connect with her grandfather.
Yeah.
But then her actions unleash this unimaginable horror.
It's like a cautionary tale about, the dangers of unchecked emotion and the unintended consequences of trying to manipulate the past.
It's almost like she represents those darker impulses we all have, like the desire for revenge, the need to make sense of loss, the temptation to rewrite history.
It's true. And the film doesn't let us off the hook as viewers,
How so?
I mean, we're drawn to these stories of disaster and horror. We can't look away, right?
Yeah, that's true.
But why? What is it about these tragedies that fascinates us so much?
That's the question that really lingers after the credits roll.
Yeah.
It's like Titanic 666, it's not just a horror film, it's a mirror,
Of ourselves.
reflecting our anxieties, our morbid curiosity, and our often contradictory relationship with history.
So before we wrap things up, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the film's ending.
Okay.
The manager becomes a ghost, forever trapped with the wreckage. Is that poetic justice? A punishment for his greed? Or something else?
Well, I think it's open to interpretation. I mean, on one level, it's definitely a fitting punishment, right? He profited from the dead, and now he's forced to join them. But there's also a sense of tragedy there, don't you think?
Totally.
This man, he was so consumed by greed that he ultimately destroyed himself. He becomes another victim of the Titanic, another ghost story added to the legend.
That's a great point. It's like the cycle continues,
Yeah.
and he becomes part of the very thing he was trying to exploit. It's both tragic and unsettling, and it speaks to the film's message about, the dangers of repeating history's mistakes.
Exactly.
It's kind of wild how Titanic 666 throws in those classic horror things,
Yeah.
like jump scares, ghosts, all that. But it's the weight of the actual Titanic story that really makes it hit hard.
Totally. You're not just watching some slasher flick,
Right. It's about, human arrogance, messing up and doing the same dumb stuff over and over.
The Titanic, it's like this metaphor for that, pushing too far, thinking you can beat the odds.
And both ships going down, the real one and the one in the movies.
It reminds you, right?
We're not as in control as we think we are. Nature's powerful stuff.
And human life, it's fragile. That comes across strong.
And then there's this strange girl. She's, I don't know, fascinating, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Starts everything off,
Mhm.
all because she misses her grandpa and wants to reach him.
You can understand that, though. Grief makes people do strange things.
For sure. But her way of doing it, it's destructive. For her, for everyone.
You get the sense she's not totally aware of what she's unleashing.
Yeah, like a warning about letting emotions take over. Thinking you can control forces, you just can't.
And the movie, it's not afraid to show the dark side of people either.
No, not at all. Sometimes we're the scariest part, not the ghosts.
Exactly. Like that saying, we've met the enemy and it is us.
Perfect quote for this movie. Because it's not just horror, it's like Titanic 666 is holding up a mirror,
To all of us.
showing our fears, our flaws, how we can be good or bad.
Makes you think, after watching it, what can we actually learn from the Titanic?
Both the real deal and this movie version. How do we avoid being greedy, arrogant, messing with things we shouldn't?
$1 million question right there. We got all these warnings from history, but are we paying attention?
Learning from what happened, or just going to do it all again?
Yeah.
Titanic 6666 definitely makes you think about that. And I hope this deep dive got you thinking too. Thanks for joining us.